Good morning, everyone. It's Kris and Hartwell here with Inspired Energy again. We're here for episode 10 of our human design exploration. So, today we are going to delve into recognizing not self dialogue as a key for deconditioning again. It's part two. The areas that we're going to be looking at are the Ajna, the spleen, and the solar plexus. So, good morning, Hartwell.
Good morning, Kris and everyone.
Yes, I'm glad that we divided this up into little bite-sized portions that we can all start to digest. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of material here.
yeah, exactly.
It's
So,
juicy.
since this is the second part in the series of a three-part series, I thought maybe there was some things that you wanted to bring forward from last week that maybe people might want to know about.
Sure. Well, last week we talked about the head, the throat, and the root, and we started to look at what the dialogue that can arise in the non-self mind as a result. The reason we're doing this, the reason it's so important, is because as we start to follow our strategy and authority, we will begin to decondition ourselves from the not-self programming of the world, and it shows up in identifiable dialogue. And you should look where your undefined centers are in your chart and start to say, okay, how is the not self dialogue arising here? Because then that becomes an aid for you recognizing the patterns that undermine you to live effectively in the world. So that's I wanted to bring that out again, Kris.
So, I'm just going to ask a question here. So, basically, what you're saying is those areas that we're undefined in are the areas in which we can take on beliefs and programming from others and the outside world. And then those are the things that can cause us problems.
Correct.
Okay.
Very well put.
Right.
Because then we start to listen to this niggling voice inside of us, and it takes us away. It takes us away from listening to our strategy and authority, and therefore takes us away from living as ourselves.
Okay. So I guess the next part that we're going to move on to the center would be the ajna. And can you explain to us what part this center plays and in terms of its not self-programming?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because today we're looking at all three of the awareness centers. All right. And Ajna is the one of them that's the mental awareness. And it is under pressure from the head center to conceptualize and figure out how we live in the world. So it puts us, the head, the top one, puts us under pressure. And then the ajna responds to that pressure by figuring things out. So that's its job, is to kind of figure things out and become an authority for other people, not for ourselves. Whether it's defined or not defined, it is still, the mind is going to be, is going to be the spokesperson for the not self themes of our chart. Right. So in people, 53% of the world have undefined minds, and these people are going to be, dialogue is going to be something like, I need to figure this out. Oh, what's the answer to this? Oh, what if I don't have an answer? How can I find the answer? What if I need to be able to come up with a plan? And, from human design's perspective, you don't have to come up with a plan. You need to follow your strategy and authority.
Right.
So these things, lead us to try and figure the world out, figure our problems out, rather than actually sinking into and trusting the process that our own body will take us through.
Oh, interesting. Because I just had a thought when you were talking about that, because I'm defined in the ajna. And so I always, and from the time I was a child, always just say, well, what makes people do that? Like, why would someone do that? Like, it was always a question, like, why would that person, go hit somebody or go, commit something, like what in their psyche would make them do that. So I guess that's part of my design that's asking that. Is that what I'm taking or
yeah, that very well could be, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And because you have a defined mind, it can be useful for offering things to others.
Mm-hmm.
But even though you have a defined mind, you have to realize that when it comes to making your own decisions, it's not going to be useful for you. That's going to be a not self program.
Yeah. But it's just the questions, like why I always have the questions, right?
Sure.
That's the thing. It's like, why am I always asking questions?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And what are they for? Are they for anything? This is the kind of processing I think you are using you as an example. This is the kind of thing that we want to ask if we dive deeper into human design. We want to start looking at our behaviors in this way and questioning. One of the things I would like to bring up to people is that as I continue my own journey to decondition, I am starting to feel what I call revving. You know how sometimes you use a machine in a way that it's not designed for, and there's that sense of, I'm laughing at myself on the screen, but this sense of going against something or overheating something or revving something or whatever. I'm starting to have that feeling now when I engage in what I feel is not self-talk for myself. It's like, oh, I can feel that this is wrong now.
So the resistance. Yeah.
I can feel the resistance in my own system to what it is I'm doing, which is a sign that I'm not in alignment.
Right.
So I wanted to share that with people because I think it's a sign. If you can feel those, if you can start to feel into when your system is not liking what you're doing, then you're starting to get somewhere.
Right. So let's move on to the second one, and that is the spleen. So what is the role of the spleen?
The spleen's job is to keep us healthy and to bring laughter and spontaneity into life. It's the immune system. And it's the oldest and most, it is the awareness center that we share with all of life. So it's the most ancient and fundamental awareness center that's about the instinct to survive. It's very instinctive, very intuitive, and it keeps us physically safe. So it's about handling survival fears.
So I think when I was looking at the notes, it said something about them wanting safety and security so bad that they would hold on to things that aren't good for them just because they feel safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
So an undefined center starts, comes into this world with this fear that they don't have the skills to stay alive physically. I do not have the survival skills that I need to live in this world. That is the fear that we come in with if we have undefined spleens. And so we have to look at those. We have to confront those fears over time. And that brings more stability to our system. But the undefined center it feels safer and secure around people who are defined. So that's that sense of, there's a sense of well-being that comes from being around a defined person. So then the non-self dialogue becomes, how can I feel safe? What keeps me feeling secure? Oh, I don't want to do that because that person might leave me or reject me. So
maybe you can tell us what there's supposed to be a golden rule for the undefined spleen. Can you share that with us?
Yes, the golden rule for the undefined spleen is never act spontaneously. Because that takes you away, because only the defined people in the spleen are defined to act spontaneously. So an undefined person can come under pressure from a defined person
Yeah.
to be spontaneous. Oh, come on, let's just do this.
Yeah.
You know, and so 45% of the world are undefined. So the other 65%, 55% will sometimes pressure us. Oh, come on, just give it a try. You know, and so that pressure to be spontaneous that can happen in that context
Right.
can actually be very harmful for the person who has an undefined spleen.
Right. So what kinds of things would the not self mind say in relationship to the undefined spleen? Can you give us some examples of kind of the mind chatter and stuff that would go on?
Yeah, it's kind of like, what do I need to do to feel good? What do I need to do to feel safe? You know, I can't leave this situation because then I won't be safe. Or I won't try that because I'm going to fail. And I don't want to feel that sense of embarrassment, you know, or I will avoid that situation because it'll put me in danger, you know, so there can be a real discomfort around that.
Yeah. I think part of your notes too that were important was being afraid of responsibility and criticism. So being afraid of having to take on the responsibility and criticism is something that I hadn't heard before from that center. So I find that interesting.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the solar plexus because we're getting close to time here. So if a person is undefined in the solar plexus, what kinds of experiences are they likely to have?
Well, 47% of the world are undefined emotionally. And so they're going to be sensitive to the emotional energy around them. And it will sometimes feel quite overwhelming. So their not self-patterning is often revolving around avoiding emotion in life. You know, I don't want to bring that up to that other person because I don't like confrontation. Or I won't tell them the truth because then they'll get angry at me. Or, you know, it's like I'm going to. How can I be kind, or how can I avoid? You know, how can I talk to this person so they don't get upset with me? You know, so how can I please this person so that I can avoid conflict with them?
Right.
So there's a lot of avoidance, you know, a lot of behaviors around being a people pleaser.
Yeah, and that would be if you're defined in the solar plexus, you said.
If you're undefined in the solar plexus, you're likely to be a people pleaser or have some of those behaviors because they help you avoid conflict.
Okay.
Or that's the not self, how the not self mind works. It's like,
so then the person that is defined in that area would be very confident and be able to handle those confrontations and stuff. So it would be the opposite.
People who are defined emotionally are not the conflict avoidant ones. You know, it's the people who are undefined who are going to say, I can't be authentic. It's not safe for me to be authentic.
Okay.
Because I'm then going to create an emotional reaction in my partner.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. So what part of the body is associated with the solar plexus?
The lungs, the pancreas, the prostate, I'm forgetting my list.
Nervous system. Kidneys.
Yes. So it covers a lot of important things, the solar plexus.
So if you're not living your not self theme and all of these parts of your body are connected to you living your theme, if you're not, then is that where you can get in areas of disease, is in those parts of your body where things would be out of balance?
That's a really good question, Kris. I think that deserves further exploration because I haven't. What I do know is that not living our design has physical consequences.
Yeah.
Right. And the particular areas that maybe you struggle with most could be under more pressure. But I mean, So I
Because
think,
I find when we're doing this and I'm
yeah.
looking at these, that those are my challenge areas, right? The areas
Mm.
that I'm undefined in, and the parts of the body that are associated with it are ones that I've struggled with and had
Oh,
challenges
okay.
with. That's why I
Interesting.
was asking.
Yeah, well, I mean, that it is definitely worth pursuing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's an area for further study. I
Yeah.
mean, it's hard to make one-to-one correlations,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely a strong hypothesis to make,
Yeah.
is that those would be vulnerable areas.
Okay. So just the last question here before we wrap up. What kind of not self dialogue will arise in the not self mind relating to the undefined solar plexus?
Um, well, I've already mentioned some of that.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
how can I calm this person down? How can I um, how can I manage my feelings?
Mm-hmm.
It's um, I want to go there because I won't have to deal with confrontations.
Right.
Let's not say that, because it might upset that person.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. It won't work. So why bother?
Mm-hmm.
There's no point in going there or saying that, because I might be disappointed or rejected.
Right.
So these are the kinds of things, and I think we can all recognize that quite clearly,
Mm-hmm. So, is
right?
there anything that you want to say as we wrap up part 2 here with the Ajna, spleen, and solar plexus?
Well, I guess what comes to me right now is, as you begin to recognize some of these patterns in yourself, be kind to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Because this is where some of the most painful sort of underlying the mental dialogue in our mind might have hurt us the most.
Mm-hmm.
And as you begin to identify it, you might have some aha moments that make you kind of go like,
Yeah.
WTF,
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
be kind. Be
Yeah.
kind to yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you for that wisdom, Hartwell. So, you guys can join us next week at 9 a.m. again. We'll be doing part 3 of this series, and we're going to be covering the heart, the sacral, and the G center. We'll be back here next Wednesday at 9 a.m. And if anybody wants to delve deeper into human design or have a private session with Hartwell, you can give us a call here at 587-596-3333 at Clarity, and we'd be happy to hook you up together. So until next week, we love you. God bless, and we'll see you next Wednesday.